This is Ahval Online, meeting point of accurate news and free comment on the current affairs of Turkey. Welcome to our podcast series.
Welcome to Turkey Trends, part of Ahval podcast series. My guest today is Süleyman Özeren, adjunct professor in George Mason University and head of the new think tank on Turkey, the Orion Policy Institute. And the topic today is very important. It's about Erdogan troll army. And to discuss that, because Süleyman have published a very interesting research about this phenomena, using trolls as an army on social media to promote certain agendas in Turkey. So Süleyman, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Nervana.
First, it will be great if you just elaborate a little bit about your new think tank, the Orion Policy Institute. What is this an independent think tank? Tell me a bit more about it.
Sure. The Orion Policy Institute is established by my colleagues and I, who are academics at different universities in the United States, in Canada and Europe. This is an independent think tank, which means we don't have any affiliation with certain individuals or groups. But this being said, we are looking forward to partnerships, collaboration and cooperation in the area of research and analysis. So this is not, the Orion Policy Institute is not going to focus solely on Turkey. Turkey would be just one of the many topics that we will be covering. So, for example, from global and domestic security issues to human rights, democracy, we are going to be covering a range of areas and disciplines. I think the sort of one of the distinctive aspects of the Orion Policy Institute is that we are going to promote policy through high quality research. In other words, we are very much looking forward to producing publications, research reports, policy briefs, op-eds based on evidence-based research.
Brilliant. But the research you just published about the political astroturfing and Twitterscape is not funded by any country or any entity. It's just your policy. Great.
No, it's just voluntary work, and it took us more than 11 months to finish this work. My colleagues and I worked days and night, and it is solely and totally voluntary based.
Fantastic. I have to say, I read it in depth and it is really amazing, and I applaud you for this hard work. So you mentioned the role of the AKP Youth Army and the political astroturfing campaign. Can you just first define what is political astroturfing mean?
I think political astroturfing is basically a centrally coordinated disinformation campaign. In other words, there is an entity, and that entity exists solely for disinformation. In our research, the youth organization of the AKP has involved in extensive disinformation campaign on social media. And in political astroturfing, it is not just about disseminating disinformation, but it is also about dominating the public discourse and leaving no room whatsoever for the opposition voices. So in this case, the AKP youth have been utilized to dominate the public discourse in favor of the AKP, and of course they also intimidated the political opposition.
What language they use? I mean, is they are focusing mainly on Turkish audience, or they use English?
It was Turkish. Yes.
Right. Fascinating. So the next step, I mean, you mention or you analyze 6,252 Turkish state-sponsored accounts. That is huge, the number. And you mention that they work in critical incidents and during election seasons. Is that correct?
Yes, Nervana. Actually, the Twitter itself has suspended and removed more than 7,000 accounts that attributed to AKP's youth organization. In other words, these were trolls organized, funded, coordinated by the AKP itself. So because of their disinformation campaigns and misinformation campaigns on social media, Twitter decided to take down these accounts along with other accounts in Russia and in China. And as you mentioned, there are two distinct areas where these accounts have been very active. The first one we categorize as the critical national events or incidents, and the second one is the elections. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the accounts that we analyzed, for example, the account creation, the number of accounts that are created during those times, the hashtags that they posted, the Twitter messages that they retweeted have increased significantly. So there were times where these accounts witnessed sort of peak, sort of surge to respond to a national critical incident or to respond to election periods.
Mm-hmm. And did you see that this account were successful in reaching and convincing the Turkish public?
I think when we look at the sort of evolution of these accounts, for example, one of the very first time when these accounts have been sort of initiated, used, was during the Gezi Park protest in 2013.
Yes.
As you might remember, the Gezi Park protesters have been very successful in using social media.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to organize their activities. And as a response to this, AKP decided to create the very first sort of troll armies, and we also call them AK trolls. These troll accounts have been active to discredit the Gezi Park protests, portrayed it as an extension of a foreign intervention. And similarly, we saw a sort of similar response or reflexive response from the troll armies during the aftermath of the corruption and bribery operations of 17th and 25th of December 2013. Mm-hmm. At that time, in these two incidents, one of the patterns that we saw is that those AKP response was sort of a reactive, responsive, right. Sort of exercise. Those times, like they use those incidents to establish the troll armies and to sort of train them and to sort of gain more experience. But following those incidents, for example, during the local elections in 2014 and the rest of the incidents, we saw sort of becoming more excelled, more experienced. Instead of being responsive, they were more of a, proactive.
I see. How about your experience? It might be not in your research because you focus on the events inside Turkey, but have you have you encountered the impacts of those trolls on the events of foreign policy, for example? I personally, in 2013, noticed the increased Turkish trolls activity during the removal of Morsi, Muslim Brotherhood president in Egypt. And they have gone wild to demonize Egyptian people who were against the Muslim Brotherhood. What impact, so my question is, what impact of those trolls on Turkey foreign policy? Because now Turkey is expanding in the Middle East, if that makes sense.
Exactly. I totally agree. I mean, when we look at the domestic policy and foreign policy of Turkey during the AKP rule, I think it is impossible to sort of, differentiate or separate these two from each other, because Erdogan purposefully used domestic violence, domestic politics as a leverage.
Right.
In foreign domain, vice versa. He used foreign policy issues at the domestic level to promote AKP's political agenda. This being said, I think when we look at the Twitter accounts and how they responded to certain incidents, for example, Kobani incidents, for example, the military intervention in Syria, the Pastor Brownson incident, the incident that created a tension between Trump administration and Erdogan administration. We saw a certain activities increase in the activities of these troll accounts, which means it is not just limited to the activities in Egypt, but also they have been active in different areas in terms of Syrian policy, in terms of US-Turkey relations. But interestingly, Nervana, these accounts have always been sort of targeting certain countries or individuals or institutions, regardless of their primary sort of focus. For example, while they were posting tweets about Gezi Park protests or corruption operations or Kobani incidents, they always try to portray the United States, the CIA, European Union, the Zionists as sort of complicit of those incidents. And what I'm saying is, I think the convergence between domestic policies and foreign policy has become so common, common that these troll accounts also have been active in two different areas at the same time.
Fascinating, because I mean, I just want to reiterate what you said, that it's the use of domestic events versus foreign policy things, and make both entities or both policies serve each other, and demonizing certain like PKK, United States, and obviously United Arab Emirates. I know it's not mentioned in your research, but now the phenomena have been evolving for now nearly maybe 8 years, if I stand to be corrected. You mentioned it from 2010 in your follow-up, and how it increased around 2013 and the Gezi protest, etc. But it is non-stop. It's relentless. Even now during the fires, there was people saying Turkey need help, and the government and their trolls immediately created a counter campaign saying that state is fine and doesn't need help. Did you notice that, or am I misreading things?
Exactly. I mean, this is, it is always about dominating the public discourse, but also it is about, always showing everyone, not just their followers, but the opposition, that they are in control. They cannot handle being seen as weak. As you mentioned, the sort of, help Turkey hashtag was and is very innocent sort of call to the international community, so that they would pay attention to what has been going on in Turkey. But the government, and especially the communication director of the Erdogan's government, portrayed that as sort of an activity coordinated from one center. What center that is, no one knows. Who that center that is, no one knows, and no one cares. So I think the sort of countering Help Turkey hashtag with Strong Turkey basically aims to show their followers, the public, that everything's under control, nothing is happening. But the unfortunate thing is that while the force the force fire is continuing, their focus should be basically helping the people and putting off that fire. But they are trying to, I think, use even that incident in their advantage in favor of the AKP, because elections are approaching. They cannot. There is no room for them to be seen as weak. That is the problem.
And how do you see the future of these organized misinformation campaigns? Do you see the public in Turkey still buying them? Or do you see it will be only a phenomena bought and believed by the hardcore supporters of Erdogan and his AKP party? And also the AKP is not a unified party. There are wings in the AKP probably behind the scene feeling uneasy about it, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Nervana, when we look at the data that we analyzed, we categorize certain political affiliations into 4 general categories: pro-Erdogan, Kemalist, nationalist, and pro-Kurdish. The reason I'm mentioning about these details is that when we look at especially the Kemalist accounts, and again, these are all trolls. These are members of the troll armies, but they are portraying themselves. They are posing as if they are the authentic followers or sympathizers of the Republican People's Party.
Right. And why are they doing that?
And there's a term, it is a technical term, but it is what is called sock puppetry, which means these individuals create false identities by concealing their actual identities, and they pretend to be sympathizers and supporters of A or B political party, while actually they are members of the AKP troll armies. When they post messages in such a way that they portray them, even though they are members of the CHP, the main opposition party, they post messages to support AKP policies. And they criticize Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who is the leader of the main opposition party. What I'm saying is here, even though, yes, the problems, economy, social, political tensions are increasing in Turkey, but the trolls are also evolve. They are evolving constantly to basically responding to changing environments. I think in the future, and now the trend has already begun, they are changing their modus operandi in terms of the messaging methods, the content of the messages, so that they could be embedded into the mainstream followers of the opposition party members.
Wow.
What I'm saying is this trend is going to continue regardless. I think, yes, there's a recent survey in Turkey, which was conducted like a couple of weeks ago. And according to that survey, more than 70%, this is an amazing number, 70% of the people believe that corruption increased in Turkey. It is amazing to me because almost more than 9 years ago, or 8 years ago, in 2013, when the corruption operations revealed a very deep and expansive corruption within the AKP government, the public sort of didn't pay attention to that because there wasn't sort of economic instability. But now, as the economy crisis deepens, I think people realize that a part of the problem is corruption. As you mentioned, the forest fire also indicated a fact that although Turkey has been seen as the regional power, sort of intervening in different countries, peace builder or whatever, however they define it, people realize that the government didn't allocate any resources for this kind of crisis. And I think that kind of weakness, that kind of vulnerability transformed itself into the perception that it is because of corruption. This being said, I think the social media is going to be another platform for the troll armies and the opposition parties to win the public sentiment, to influence the public perceptions. That is why I think AKP government is going to continue using troll armies, while at the same time try to use other tools to silence the opposition.
Okay, one last question. Do you see the opposition in Turkey trying to match up to that, or at least try to debunk the false information spreading against them? And is this effort successful, or it's a non-starters?
I think if the question is about the opposition political parties, I must say they are not helping the dissenting voices, the opposition voices, but they are indirectly somehow they are ending up helping the ruling party. Instead of focusing on the real problems, what we see, especially by some of the members of the main opposition party, they are tackling down or they are taking on certain issues which are not priority of the society.
Right.
This being said, however, the individuals, the members of NGOs, activists,
yes,
independent journalists, I think they are much more effective. Journalists, not just in Turkey, but journalists who are in exile.
yes.
Their followers, the number of their followers are increasing because people want to listen to the realities, not some socially constructed realities, but the actual facts on the ground. That is why I think the individuals, activists, and NGOs, whether these are the human rights activists or whether these are the journalists or intellectuals, I think they are much more effective on social media. That is why now the government is preparing another legal tool to silence the opposition in the name of fighting against disinformation. I think they are gonna try and close down every channels for the facts, for the voices who are basically talking about the realities, but by blocking them, they are trying to basically shut down these kinds of channels. This is one of the concerns that I'm thinking about. So I think the opposition parties should do more on preventing this from happening. I don't know how they are going to do that.
Professor Süleyman Özeren, thank you so much for that. I hope people will wake up and the Turkish public will wake up and stand and not buying the Turkish trolls narrative and their evolution and their embedding in false identities, because this is dangerous and the future of Turkey is hanging on the balance. I wish my Turkish brothers and sisters all the best. Thank you so much, Professor Özeren.
Thank you, Nervana, for having me.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here, for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.